Bonjour. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this second webinar of our Sustainable Development Goal webinar series. Many thanks for making the time to join us today for COVID-19, a transformative opportunity to advance the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm Denise Emiot, President and CEO at Colleges and Institutes Canada. As many of you know, we are a national association that represents the interests of nearly 140 post-secondary member institutions across Canada. Our vision as an association and a sector is better futures for peoples and communities. As such, we are committed to ensuring that no one gets left behind, which is a pledge that is central to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the implementation, of course, of the 17 SDGs. So while the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in unprecedented challenges that affected our progress towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals beyond SDG 3, good health and well-being, there is an opportunity to build back better. At Colleges and Institutes Canada, we look forward to supporting our members, colleges and institutes, cégeps, polytechnics, in achieving a better future for peoples and communities, and to working with you and your team. And Olivier, to inspire and engage our stakeholders in fulfilling Canada's ambitions and goals related to the SDGs. So I'm pleased to share with you that without even a few weeks of being in his new role, as the director of the Sustainable Development Goals Unit at ESDC, Olivier Bullion has kindly agreed to share an opening remark with us today on the Government of Canada's response to the pandemic and how that connects with the UN SDGs. So it's a pleasure to be able to have Olivier with us today. So let me tell you a little bit about Olivier. So prior to his role, he was the Director of Policy in the Innovations and Policy Services branch at the Canada School of Public Service. He also recently completed a 10-week micro mission at the Public Health Agency of Canada, supporting, in fact, the COVID-19 task force. Earlier in his career, he has worked at Global Affairs Canada and has held various assignments in Europe, Asia, Middle East, and North America. So there's nobody better placed to be able to talk to us today about the Sustainable Development Goals. So Olivier.
Merci beaucoup, Denise. Thank you very much for those welcoming remarks. So my name is Judy Vargatoff, and I am the manager for the Impact Partnership Services at Colleges and Institutes Canada, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. And before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping notes. We'll have a slide for you as well, and it's the standard housekeeping notes. We'll ask you to all stay muted until the question and answer period. We'll have 2 question and answer periods this time. We will invite questions immediately after the director has spoken, in case you have specific questions right then, and you can please feel free to put also your questions in the chat box, and we will be looking at that and answering questions throughout in the chat box as well. If you have any technical difficulties, please mention it in the chat box. We have tech folks to help out. Warren is one of the folks in the chat box, and you can always find him, and we'll be looking out for anything you might need help with. We also encourage you to tweet about the webinar using hashtag CICAN impact so that we can amplify our conversation today. So without further ado, I would like to invite Olivier Bullion to share some remarks with us. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you, Denise, for the warm welcome and the opportunity to join you today for the seminar. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Olivier Bullion. As Denise mentioned, I'm the new director of the SDG unit at Employment and Social Development Canada. This is my second week on the job, so I'm still getting up to speed on the great work that has been done today by the team and by all of you. I'm sincerely excited to be taking on this new role and to be able to support, contribute, and be part of championing such an important global initiative. As many of you already know, Canada and all others United Nations members adopted the 2030 Agenda in 2015. At the heart of this global framework are 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the commitment to leave no one behind. Since the adoption of the 2030 Agenda, COVID-19 happened. Our world has changed. Since the beginning of the pandemic, virtually everyone on the planet has been affected. Today, we're only starting to understand the impacts of COVID-19 and these types of crises on global and national development. Today, the short to medium-term impacts of the measures taken to flatten the curve are far from being understood. And this is even more true when looking at the long-term implications of measures that will define our new normal. This crisis is testing our resilience, the resilience of our models, of our societies. The crisis is testing our capacity to withstand shocks, but it's also testing our capacity to protect and sustain progress achieved on many fronts for the many, and our commitment to leave no one behind. Too often during those crises, short-term priorities trump long-term objectives. Too often during those crises, marginalized and vulnerable groups face disproportionate consequences. Today, we're at a crossroad. The COVID-19 is forcing us to rethink our models, and it's offering us an opportunity, as Denise said, to build back better, with a focus on supporting people living in poverty, reducing inequality, creating a healthy environment where we all can enjoy and live freely and happily, building a sustainable economy, holding promises for economic growth, innovation, and job creation. So we could not agree more with the title of the webinar today. We are facing a transformative opportunity. We are facing a transformative opportunity where SDGs offer a holistic, a multifaceted frame of reference to capture both progress and impacts of the crisis, but also impacts of our policies to address the crisis, particularly as we look at ways to build a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable Canada. In fact, the most valuable aspect of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs are that they are not just for government or large corporations to tackle. They empower citizens, entrepreneurs, tradespeople, academics, and citizens from all walks to contribute to solving the challenges facing society and the planet today. Since the inception of the SDG unit in October 2018, the team has been engaging different groups across the country to help us better understand the challenges and opportunity the SDG present in Canada. With this information, we launched an SDG funding program last spring to support organizations to advance the work of the SDG, on the SDG. We also published an interim plan called Towards Canada's National Strategy in June of last year, and we're currently working in partnership with Statistics Canada to further develop a Canadian indicator framework to support reporting on Canada's progress. Moving forward, we're currently working on releasing a 2030 national strategy and continuing our effort to build awareness, create new partnerships, inspire, support action, and promote excellence on that very important topic. This is ambitious, and we know we cannot, as the Federal Public Service, do it alone. But as we've heard through our consultations, we're not alone. And today's event is just a testimony of that. And we are very encouraged to see that colleges and institutes across the country, colleges and institutes talking about the SDG and demonstrating leadership. And we are very pleased we can have this conversation together today. So I will stop there. If you want to learn a bit more about the unit, I'll encourage you to check out the link that we'll be posting in the chat box. Thank you again for your time today. I'm really looking forward to our continued collaboration. And I wish you a great webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those words that we appreciate. And now we have an opportunity, if anyone has any immediate questions or even any comments with respect to what we've heard about, we understand that it's early days yet to be in a position to be committing to concrete actions. We understand that the government is still in crisis mode, and so we certainly understand that, and we encourage folks on the webinar to understand that we will not get all the answers that we would all hope to have, because I'm sure you don't have them either. But we hope to see an opportunity to work together with yourself and with the government as a sector to move this agenda forward. So I'd wonder if anybody has any questions. I wonder, Christine or Denise, if you have anything that you would like to add or ask. And if not, then we will move towards our first panelist. And as I said, Olivier has agreed to stay with us. And therefore, it will be great to both share what our sector and partners are doing, and also have a chance to ask questions that would include him at the end of the call. Christine, did you want to have some? I see you turned on your camera, so please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank Olivier for the comments, and I think one of the goals are all important, obviously, but probably the one that is most appealing to an organization like Colleges and Institutes Canada is number 17, the partnerships for the goal. Because as a relatively small not-for-profit association, there's only so much we can do as an entity. But I think our opportunity is really to build partnerships not only for our association, but with our members and for our members, to so many of the actors in society who are going to help to achieve some of the other goals. So I'd just be interested in hearing a little bit of a drill down, maybe from Olivier, your comments on that partnership for the goals and how we can help to achieve that.
Thanks, Christine. It's a very good question. As you understand, everybody knows the partnership is at also the heart of the 2030 agenda. As I mentioned, everybody understands that it's such a broad file, such a collective responsibility, that we all have individual and collective responsibilities in achieving those goals. As many of you are aware, the indicators of the SDGs are not just under the authority of the federal government. Many of the indicators are under the responsibility or the jurisdiction of other layers of the government, being provincial, territorial, municipal, and many, so about 30 or more of indicators, or 30% of the indicators are actually under the control of municipalities. So it's a collective effort that we understand. I think moving forward, when we are looking at a strategy, we want really to capitalize, and I don't want to sound a bit naive or simplistic, but we really have to capitalize on each of those layers. We know we have to engage the general population, encourage them, show them excellence, but that's not enough. We know we have to work very closely with provinces and territories and communities to support in their specific ways to achieve their goals, but that's not enough. We need to engage in those virtual cycles. We need to find, following our engagement, ways to create partnerships with academia, with businesses, to achieve collectively those goals. And I think that's going to be one of the main challenge for us moving forward. It's to identify how best to leverage everybody's support and capitalizing on specificities, strength. And we definitely see a massive role engaging further with colleges, with institutes. You are preparing the generation of tomorrow. We need to work and create those virtual cycles. So a bit of a circumvented answer, but I think in a way of a strategy, we have to prioritize, we have to select, we have to identify. And so far, I think we're not there yet to really know how we can best capitalize with each institution and each of you. We've launched a lot of new projects through the fund, and about 70 projects have been funded. So we are starting creating partnerships. We will further those partnerships. But I think it's very important for us to further engage to know exactly how best we can help you, and for you to guide us as well into how you would like our action to moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Really encouraging, really encouraged. So I think now is a perfect time to move on to our first panelist. I think that I have had the privilege of getting to know Trish O'Connor over the last number of months since I started here at CICAN. She was one of the very first people that I met, and she works at Fleming College, which is in Peterborough, Ontario. And from my experience of the last 16 months, I would say that Trish has to be, if not the most, one of the most experienced practitioners of the SDGs within our sector. And she really has done exceptional work at her college and influenced the work of Ontario practitioners, and is also very involved on a North American scale. So I ask Trish to share her slides and talk to us about the journey of Fleming around the SDGs and how you're framing this in the post-COVID era.
Great, thanks very much, Judy. There's just a little bit about me on the first slide, but I really appreciate your comments, and I'm very honored and thankful to be invited here today. A little bit different from Olivier, I'm actually entering my last week of my current position, so sort of the opposite side of the coin there. So I want to talk about the SDGs firstly, of course. This is what we're here about, and really, these SDGs in and of themselves they're a great opportunity because they're such a coherent picture. Most people can look at these SDGs, faculty, administrators, staff at colleges, and they can identify with them. They're simple, they're colorful, but we can agree, no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, ever so important now. Climate action, life on land, life below water, partnerships. Sometimes they have a little bit of trouble getting their arms around all 17. So I do like the 5P model here that you can see, people, planet, prosperity, partnership, and peace. And I really love prosperity, not profit, it's prosperity. So I find this helpful as well to communicate within your college community. So this is great. We've already heard from others. We have Agenda 2030. We've entered into 2020, the decade of action. We're ready to go. And then COVID. So this is a picture that just sort of depicts the moment. COVID is obviously a huge global crisis and a huge challenge, and rightfully so. It is the focus. There's some sense that maybe it has taken the focus away from climate change, and climate change, as you can see, it's the largest wave, it's the last wave, it's the biggest crisis, that's coming, down, that's coming towards us. And it relates to deforestation, pollution, biodiversity loss. And those are the very contributing factors to the spread of the virus. If you look at sort of the predictions with climate change, they always predicted that increasing viruses, increasing wildlife to human contact, increasing pandemics was going to be an outcome of climate change. So we call it, we talked about SDSN Canada. If you get the chance to listen to Catherine Hayhoe, she talks about the triple threat or the triple multiplier of climate change. And that just makes everything worse. So the pandemic that we're experiencing now, climate change, those that are vulnerable are even more vulnerable. Those that are in developing countries that have lack of access to clean water and sanitation are even more vulnerable during this time. And so we see that in the news. We also see issues of, racial justice is connected to climate justice. Those that are living in poverty and those that are living in slums in cities with more pollution are having, there's a greater impact of the virus. It's more severe and it's more prevalent. So those that are vulnerable, those that were vulnerable are even more so now with respect to COVID. And the paper, I think, that was sent out ahead of time really depicts this. I know it's hard to read that particular graphic, so I encourage you to actually look at the paper that was put out by United Nations. It's responding to the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19, and it really is talking about those living in, in war zones. So we look at SDG 16 being peace. It talks about SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. Again, the impact of those that don't have access to clean water and sanitation, be able to practice proper hand hygiene, a very simple practice for dealing with the spread of virus. Those that are living in unsustainable cities, SDG 11, that are living in slums and they're very in close quarters. Decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, those that were already vulnerable and the poor and in the service sector, not just in developing countries, but in our own country. That's where we're seeing a lot of the unemployment. We're seeing a lot of the unemployment with respect to women. So the issue of gender equality. So more and more we're seeing that the impacts of COVID are very specifically impacts on the SDGs. And if you read that paper, if we had made greater progress on the SDGs, we would be in a better position to deal with the pandemic right now. So that paints kind of a grim picture, and I'm sorry to start that way, but I'll launch right into the role of community colleges. What is the role of community colleges during this time? And we tend to have 5 pillars when we talk about sustainability at community colleges. And the 5 pillars are campus, culture, curriculum, research, and community. We call this the whole institution approach. And it is a UNESCO model. And I like this model because it really grasps the whole institution. And it's a model, again, that people can identify with. Oh, we get it. Research, curriculum. Yes, we've always worked with communities. So we often use this framework in moving forward. So if we look at campus, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, and I'm also going to talk about some of the opportunities as I see it with respect to the SDGs during this time. When we talk about sustainable campus, we're concerned about our built environment and our natural environment. So in sustainability, we're looking at energy use, reducing our energy, water, waste, greenhouse gas reductions, contributions to SDG 13, as you can see, climate action. We're concerned coming back into campus. We're concerned about the gains that we made, for example, in waste, the reduction of single-use plastics on campus. What is that going to look like when we get back on campus and there's less use of reusable, cutlery, dishware. We banned bottled water on campus. We were the first college in Canada to do so in 2011. What is that going to look like when we come back on campus? That we haven't been selling plastic water bottle and we're using reusable H2O stations. So those are very practical considerations and challenges. But as colleges, we are living labs. We are living labs for innovation. So we need to think about how we can partner. And we talked about SDSN Canada earlier, and that's a very important vehicle, pan-Canadian network out of the University of Waterloo, how we can partner for solutions that can be used at our college campuses because we are a microcosm of society, but then expand it out in terms of knowledge transfer. I want to hone in on a specific issue around life on land and a couple of projects we've had at Fleming College. So I've already talked about the issue, the focus of the pandemic and the impact on the vulnerable in terms of those that are experiencing food scarcity. For example, we have a project underway, and it started last year between United Way, Crayola, and the City of Kawartha Lakes and Frost Campus, our Sustainable Agriculture Program, and it's the Binney and Smith Garden. So this is a garden where we've taken vacant land and Crayola property and we've transformed it into a community garden that's providing food for those that are food insecure in the City of Kawartha Lakes. We pulled 5,000 pounds off this garden in the first year, but we're also using this garden with our Sustainable Agriculture Program to teach them about sustainable agriculture practices. So think about life on land, preserving soil, but also teaching those who need to learn how to grow food. So it's the full food cycle, if you will. So this is already happening. And so I guess my hypothesis here today is we just need to keep doing as colleges what we're already doing really well to support the SDGs and even expand that. A little shout out there to Living Planet at campus there too. That's World Wildlife Fund that's doing fantastic work with colleges across Canada around small biodiversity preservation projects on campus, remembering that biodiversity is an important issue with climate change. I'm going to talk about culture for a second, sustainable culture. So responsible consumption and production. You can see there we've released sustainable procurement guidelines. We often talk about social procurement. So this is about doing the right thing as colleges in how we procure and how we consume, but it's also really, really important that we teach our students that this is something that isn't just behind or back of the house, the paper we buy or the furniture we buy. And this really was hit home to me with free trade. I knew free trade was a good thing to do, but it's really important to have free trade available on campus, free trade banana, coffee, chocolate, whatever, because we're teaching our students in their early consumer years to make the right decisions, to make decisions that take into account social justice and the impact on environment. So again, we're a living lab and we're developing the future leaders, professionals, consumers. So it's really important. Diversity and inclusivity is always important, Of course, social justice is definitely an issue right now that's very top of mind along with the pandemic. And so focusing on truth and reconciliation. So these are things we're already doing, and we just need to keep it up and keep doing what we're doing well. Curriculum or raison d'etre, quality education. Of course, the goal here is to have expanded education for everyone, for both, I've got this here. I actually have these SDGs in front of me and I haven't looked at my notes once, but we know that the goal is to really provide quality education for everyone, for both inclusive education and completion. So obviously with the pandemic, we have X number of children that have been out of school, but we also have issues of access. Those that don't have access, digital access and access to broadband, it's creating a greater diversity there. So we're doing a lot already at colleges in terms of digital learning, and we need to keep that up. We also need to focus on the labor force readiness for the low carbon economy. We've heard already Build Back Better. You know, I thought I was going to be the first one to say it, but my thunder was stolen. You know, it's really important to consider building back better in a green and socially just economic recovery. So we need to be prepared for that in terms of the programs that we're offering. And we need to also focus on sustainability as the whole student experience. You can just see at the bottom, there's a snapshot there of our Enactus group on campus. And these groups are, they're across college campuses in Canada, and there are about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. Our particular group here is working on their paper planet project, which is basically taking paper waste on campus, repurposing it for biodegradable plant pots that they use to grow food, but more importantly, they take it into local grade schools and teach the students how to grow food, in particularly in low-income areas. So it's the full food cycle, and it really contributes to quality education. Got to talk about research. One of our primary focuses, so you already heard about the issues of clean water and sanitation. One of our primary focuses at Fleming has been our Center for Advancement of Water and Wastewater Technology. We're already doing great work in Canada with Indigenous communities and around the world. So that's something we need to, because of COVID, we need to keep up this work. It's ever more important now. And I already put a plug in for SDSN Canada, but it's here, and I encourage all colleges to join. There are a number of colleges in Canada that are already members, and this is a great vehicle to share knowledge and for research and learning and teaching and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. And lastly, but definitely most importantly, is community. We've always been great partners with our communities around sustainable cities and communities. We need to continue to work with our communities in partnership. We need to continue to build back better, strong and resilient local economies. A little bit here about our local Peterborough Economic Development. This is their new strategic plan for 4 years that they launched just before the pandemic. And it was a commitment to a sustainable, Peterborough being the most sustainable and innovative local community, but also they picked 5 SDGs. And then the pandemic hit, but they came out with a local action plan that said, we are not going to lose our commitment to sustainability and those SDGs. And so Fleming is as an important partner in this local task force that was struck for the economic recovery by our mayor and our warden. And we've actually created a position, a chief recovery officer, that's working hand in glove with our community. So these are important things that colleges are doing, and we need to keep on doing. I'm going to end with a quote. This was out of the paper that I shared, and it gives us some future hope. The white paper is a little bit dire, but it speaks to what can be accomplished when governments, academia, businesses, employers work together, and civil societies.
Thank you so much, Trish. Great to end on a high note, but at the same time, completely agree with you that the time for action is what is on us and has been for quite a while. And I appreciate how you demonstrated that we're already doing great work and that we need to continue that great work, and we need to be supported to continue that great work and also scale up the great work. And I forgot to mention that Trish is part of our Pan-Canadian Campus Sustainability Working Group that is working with a number of institutions across 6 provinces to scale up our efforts around sustainability. And so we're really pleased that she is part of that group as well. So thank you, Trish. And I know there will be questions. I myself already have a few for you for the end, but I'd like to now invite Cyrielle to take the stage and prepare her slides. And we will again encourage you to put questions or comments in the chat box if you have any. And we're really pleased that Cyrielle Noël was able to join us. She is currently a program specialist for the Ocean Bridge program at Ocean Wise. And so we're going to hear some perspectives from her sector and from younger people as they face the post-COVID recovery. So please go ahead.
All right, thank you so much for the introduction. And I would like to say that it's a pleasure and an honor to also speak to you all today and have this platform. So a little bit about me. Oh no. Okay, here we go. So I am trained as an urban planner and I have a specialization in marine spatial planning and coastal environments, planning and coastal environments as well. And I currently work for Ocean Wise, which is a Canadian ocean conservation organization based out of the Vancouver Aquarium. And in my extra professional activities, I am a local Pathways Fellow and a Global Shaper in the Montreal Hub. So a little bit about what I'm going to present to you today. I'm going to discuss how I champion the Sustainable Development Goals through my work, which is through Ocean Wise, and through my play, which is like extra professional activities, but my local Pathways Fellowship and my work with the Global Shapers. So a little bit about Ocean Wise's Ocean Bridge program. So it's part of the Canada Service Corps suite of programming, and it's a year-long ambassadorship for young adults that kind of mandates them to create service projects based on ocean conservation within their home communities. And then twice a year, they get the opportunity to also go on trips. So the first trip that they will go on is usually halfway through the year in the summer months. And they go on more of a wilderness learning journey where they primarily learn about ocean and waterway health. And that is, the programming is kind of designed by the staff. So it's kind of the staff side of things. And then the second journey that they go on is an urban learning journey. And that's mostly participant led. So they're able to kind of promote ocean literacy within urban centers in Canada. So for our remote learning journeys, typically there's 4 cohorts. So we have, they go to Haida Gwaii, they go to Lake Superior, Saguenay-Saint-Laurent, and Eastport, Newfoundland, which is the team that I work on. And then for the urban learning journeys, they go to Vancouver, Ottawa, Montreal, and Halifax. So that's a little bit about the program. So how are we kind of impacted by COVID? So since our program is kind of, as I mentioned, there's a big component of travel. So the logistical and technical implications around rearranging travel arrangements are obviously a really difficult challenge that we have to kind of wrap our heads around, but we are kind of dealing with it and making more local trips. But what was kind of interesting is that there was a lot of opportunities that were unlocked through COVID. So kind of while being sensitive to the trauma and difficulties that the pandemic has precipitated for a lot of communities, so a lot of the ambassadors have taken the opportunity to kind of address direct needs that are in their community. So something that I've noted through my work with the ambassadors is that there's an opportunity to promote an intergenerational culture of service. So while I understand that change is kind of precipitated by addressing or targeting the youth in society, as a youth myself, I sometimes kind of get a little bit frustrated because we're asked to kind of participate in this service and then mobilize for the Sustainable Development Goals and then also address the impending climate or the climate crisis that is happening right now and then the social justice revolutions. So I think that with COVID, we noticed that a lot of adults kind of were out of work. So there was more time for them to mobilize for the needs of their community. And this is something that I hope will kind of last within our society beyond the COVID context. And within the Ocean Bridge program, there was an opportunity to kind of reimagine service that kind of respects physical distancing orders. And those adaptations that we're able to make can also have relevance in terms of diversity and inclusion going forward, which is really exciting for us. And then obviously it was a challenge, but it was an opportunity to develop like a wider range of programming that more people can see themselves in. So that was really exciting. And so how is Ocean Bridge contributing to Canada's 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda? So prior to COVID, so at the conception of the program, they're working at the intersection of SDG 14, which is Life Below Water, SDG 17, which is Partnership for the Goals, SDG 13, Climate Action, and SDG 4, which is Quality Education. And our approach to quality education is more of an experiential education approach. So I think that our program has, going out of COVID as we emerge, I think that by promoting a culture of service and also fostering a blue generation, Ocean Bridge and programs such as this can actually put Canada on the map as a sustainable blue economy leader. So now we're going into the play zone. So through my Local Pathways Fellowship, I'm just gonna explain a little bit about what it is. So it's an SDSN fellowship, and it connects, I think it's about 128 youth. So it's urban planners, experts, leaders, thinkers, artists. And the SDG that this particular program tries to address is SDG 11, which is kind of the urban planning sustainable development goal. So what I love about this fellowship is it's customizable to your interest. And I like that you're actually learning while doing. So while you're understanding on how to localize the SDG 11, you're applying that to a project as well. And so what I chose to do is, I'm based in Montreal, so I chose to look at SDG 11.7, which is by 2030, the target 11.7, which is by 2030 to provide universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public spaces, in particular for women and children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. So the reason why I decided to choose this is because I'm really attracted to parks and things like that. And obviously nature and environment is really something that speaks to me, but also there's a unique opportunity coming up in Montreal as they're trying to build the largest urban park within Canada. So through my project, I'm looking at tracing the case for blue space. And just to give you a little bit more context as to what I think is blue space. So blue space, as per my imagination, but I'm still also figuring out what this is, but it's coastal recreational transitional space that particularly can accommodate for the seasons, I think is important. And it's space that can prevent flooding during the spring thaw. So this is actually a photo that was taken last year outside in my neighborhood. And I think that if we did have more coastal space that could be blue corridors or parkways, we can avoid events such as this. It's an opportunity to promote waterway literacy within Canada and not just kind of focus on ocean literacy, as a lot of Canada is landlocked as well. So highlighting creeks, rivers, and different types of water bodies is important. I mean, if we think of blue space at a larger scale, it could possibly have effects to mitigate climate change by carbon capturing and storage services that these spaces can provide. And what's really exciting for me is, especially being from Montreal, I think it kind of balances our perspective between blue and green. I often find that in my social spheres or just by talking to people, we often overemphasize parks and the mountain, especially here in Montreal, but there's that lack of kind of maybe engagement or interaction with the waterways. And for me, this is particularly problematic because Montreal is the second most populous river island in the world, which is a little known fact, and is something that we can really champion as a leader in this kind of urban planning innovation, I think. And what does this have to do with pandemics? So just generally having access to more space, open space, will allow more people to recreate and reconnect to nature during pandemics. And this can have physical, psychosocial, and spiritual benefits. So through this fellowship, I'm kind of working at the nexus of SDG 11, which is Sustainable Communities and Cities, and SDG 14, which is Life Below Water. And just to remind you, I'm specifically looking at the target 11.7. And so to chat a little bit about the Global Shapers. So the Global Shapers is the youth network of the World Economic Forum. And there's a lot of hubs. We're at almost 10,000 shapers total. There's over 400 hubs, and we're active in 148 countries. So it's really quite a large network, and each hub kind of focuses on events and projects to drive action and change. So the change that we're seeking is under 3 themes. So we have climate and environment, education and employment, and equity and inclusion. So within my hub, I'm just going to speak to 2 of the projects that are really exciting and relevant to what we're discussing today. So during COVID, and this is something that we're hoping is going to also stay beyond COVID, a really interesting project kind of emerged, and it was, what I loved about it is that it was based on a need. So we created Montreal Cares, which was a matching service for volunteers, people who had spare time and were able to mobilize for their neighbors. And so people could request people to pick up groceries, do their laundry, whatever need they needed in that moment. And so it was really successful, and I hope that it's something that can be adapted and just kind of stay and match whatever need our shop comes up next, because we know that they're coming, as Trish showed us with the wave image. And then the other project that I wanted to speak about it's still kind of in development, but it's one that I'm really excited about and I'm personally working on, is the SDG project. So it's we're trying to kind of socialize the goals within the hubs across Canada and have a way for the impact to be measured with regards to the goals. So really exciting stuff. So I urge you, in conclusion, I've kind of given you a little wrap up of how I am kind of championing the SDGs through my work and my extra professional activities. So I just kind of urge you to think about how you can do the same and help contribute to us building back better after COVID. So thank you so much. I'm particularly interested in continuing conversations around building the sustainable blue economy. So feel free to reach out to me if you do have any questions, concerns. Yeah, I'm always happy to chat.
Thank you so much. That was so inspiring, really interesting. And I love the way you brought in not just the work part, but I love the reflection you shared even in our pre-webinar conversation earlier this week about a culture of service. I really, really appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear you calling out older people as well around, you know, it was very kind of you to not say that we're asking you guys to solve a problem we created, but I know that sentiment exists and is 100% valid. So thank you for sharing with us. And I do hope that we'll be able to stay in touch and have you inspire our work with youth and college youth in particular. So I sense that the conversation is only beginning. So I would like to invite questions now for all 3, for Olivier, who I believe is still with us, and Trish and Cyrielle. Both feel free to post in the chat if you have questions, and also to just, I think that we can allow you to unmute yourselves if you're ready to ask a question. And while we wait to see, I know there's a lot of comments thanking you all for your excellent presentations. And perhaps one thing, to not put Olivier on the spot, but if he felt that at some point he may want to reflect back on any of what he heard, perhaps, I know I'm inspired and I already knew some of this, and I'm so inspired. But I have a couple of questions just to launch into the questions. So I had a question for Trish first. 2 things that came up for me in your talk. You used the term Chief Recovery Officer, which I have never heard before, and I would be very intrigued to know, who does this person work for and what do they do? And then second question, which is, from your perspective at a college in Ontario, what's the biggest risk right now that you're seeing because of COVID? What has been put at risk? You spoke about all the great work you've been doing, your colleagues and peers across Canada have been doing, but what's the risk here if we do the wrong thing?
Right. Okay. So a Chief Recovery Officer, that is a fairly new position, and it's created in response, you know, obviously because economic recovery and economic recovery within our community is a big focus of our community. So as partners with the community, Fleming has created this role. It's a senior role that will be sitting on the Mayor and Warden's Task Force for Economic Recovery, but also because colleges are very important partners and entities within their communities. The students come, you know, that's an important economic contribution, right? We house the students, they impact our culture. So anything that is focusing on economic recovery within our community needs to really embrace the college and the university. So we have both Fleming College and Trent University. So we do work very closely and hand in glove with our economic development, with our city, with our counties, etc. So that's why the position was created. We're on this journey together, right? We're all learning. We're all learning how to build back better. And, you know, looking at development projects that are shovel worthy instead of just shovel ready, right? So we're looking at those green strings that have been attached to some of the economic recovery packages and hoping to see more of that. The threats, you know, obviously there's enrollment challenges everywhere because of COVID. And so there's a need to pull back on some resources. So I see that there could be some threats in terms of capacity to carry on with some projects. One of the projects I meant to talk about, but I didn't, was we have a seed project, again, at our Frost campus, which is a living seed library where we're doing active research on climate change mitigation for species at risk, tree and plant species at risk. So we've developed an arboretum, we have a seed library, and it's really taking Carolinian species and looking at how they can adapt to a more northern climate using germplasm. Kind of getting technical there, but it's a very important project with climate change and to combat biodiversity loss. So is there going to be the resources to support those kind of projects going forward? I think that's why it's really important to get connected to networks like SDSN Canada. I know that they have some funding to support the SDGs, and they're anticipating some more. So we'll get more done through partnership now. We'll need to get more done through partnerships. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's great. So now a question for Cyrielle, two also questions for you, and then I see a ton in the chat box. So just briefly, I've never heard the term blue economy before. I love it. I love how you talked about a blue generation and a blue economy, but if you could just give those of us who don't know this term just a bit of an idea more. I get a general idea what you meant. And then also if you could speak for a moment about the culture of service concept that you shared.
Yeah, sure. So the sustainable blue economy is relatively new. Even marine spatial planning is like, when I kind of specialized in it, I did so because I had only read articles that had been published since 2008. So I was really curious to get involved. And so I think that it is an opportunity. It's not all the way defined. What I understand it to be is just any economic activities that can exist within our EEZ. And that could be tourism opportunities. We have a lot of new economic activities that could be housed in our offshore zones, which is like renewable energy. We could have offshore wind, things like that. So we could also have aquaculture. So there's a lot of opportunities, and seabed mining, but we have to kind of do it in a way that doesn't further harm our precious environment. And I think that Canada especially has such a golden opportunity because we have 3 oceans. We have the longest coastline in the world. So I think that we have the opportunity to define what an amazing sustainable blue economy can look like. So I'm really excited to get that going here. And the culture of service, how I understand it and how I was kind of just raised is just, you have your work life, you have your social life, and then you have what you do to give back to your community. I've always volunteered. It was something that was kind of built into the curriculum in my school, in elementary school and high school. And so it's something that even though I'm working almost 40 hours a week, I still kind of find the time to dedicate to giving back to my community. And I think that it keeps me connected to the people that are in my surroundings in a way that I wouldn't be connected to. It also keeps me mindful of the issues that are present within my community. And this is actually something that brought me back to Canada, because I had initially studied international development and kind of wanted to merge international development and urban planning and go abroad. And I was working in development, and I was like, oh, okay, there's a lot of people who are out here trying to do good in the world, but I found that there was a bit of a disconnect when I asked them what kind of activities they had done at home. So for me to kind of want to eventually maybe do international development again, I think the big piece is to kind of be home, be doing what you need to do for your community and learn from that, and then maybe go out and spread your knowledge.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Excellent answers. Thank you. So now we have two questions. One is for Olivier. It's from John Beal, who heads up the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Canada. And he is asking, wondering if the SDG unit is working with other ministries to position the SDGs as a framework on the vision for the Government of Canada to build back better. Are you hearing discussions within the government about how to frame building back better?
So it's an excellent question. I'll answer it a bit differently. As you guys know, there's a lot of initiatives going on right now, some predating COVID, some consequences of COVID. To name a few, you are very familiar with the Federal Sustainable Development Plan, so run by Environment Canada. In relation to COVID, finance is working on, for example, well-being indicators and how we can actually put well-being in the center of policy consideration, departing from the all economics and just GDP and output production. So moving towards a more social type of thing. As you probably are aware, Natural Resources Canada, I said, are also working together to bring greener economy, greener solution. So there is a lot of discussion on how all those excellent frameworks that are answering very critical policies and demands from Canadians, how can we bring them together? So needless to say, there's a lot of conversation how we can bring all those policies, how we can report on them in an homogeneous fashion, as opposed to build a multitude of indicators and sometimes kind of lose track of what the ultimate impact, or try to not take into consideration what could be adverse impact of specific policies. Of course, you create employment. If it's not done right, you will also create pollution. So often some key ministries don't necessarily prioritize those adverse effects because they are focusing on them. And so I think it's a collective. So yes, there's a lot of discussion on how to bring coherence around those issues so that we can avoid multiplying initiatives that are sometimes confusing for Canadians. So yeah, the answer is yes. The other answer, it's going to be difficult. We also have to be realistic. And often, unfortunately, so some of the priorities, they come and go. So some are very critical, but they might be tainted by the flavor of the day, the flavor of the month, and we move from one priority to the next very quickly. So for us, it's COVID versus the opportunity to integrate the ATG as the base, as a framework. It's a long conversation. It's an ongoing conversation. That's the good news. And we can only hope that we'll succeed in that conversation, but it's not as easy as it sounds, of course.
Thank you very much for that. A quick follow-up question from another speaker for you, Olivier, is with respect to the call for proposals. So currently it is closed, but I don't know if you have any indication yet.
I was about to type an answer for that one. So yes, the call is for proposal is officially closed, and to go even further, most of the funds that have been allocated to the program have been committed for a couple of years. But that being said, we are always looking for new proposals. So even though the call for proposal is technically closed, we'll always welcome new proposals. We're a bit of a weird situation where we try to kickstart the fund, disperse funds, engage with new partners, get project out of the door, and then COVID hits. So now we have to relook at, okay, how can we probably take on new projects that will take on that aspect that was completely not integrated in previous proposals. So even though call for proposal is closed on our website, we are looking at options for additional projects that could actually come and complement the work that is being done, especially when it's related to COVID.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's great. And I know that Syria did also answer the question in the chat box, but it's such a great question that maybe not everybody, I know I don't often follow the chat box when I'm not responsible for it. The question was about how young people are so effective and inspiring at mobilizing and combining their passion for effective change. But what barriers are there? I don't know, Cyrielle, if you attended Cégep. I think you probably did if you were in Quebec. So many of our members are Cégeps. There's some on the call today who are, I know from their names, I know them, I know they're with Cégeps. What are the barriers? What are we missing here to not burden young people with like the obligation to solve problems created by their parents and grandparents, but at the same time, how do we engage them in becoming the people that like you've become, somebody who really puts your money where your mouth is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think when I was in Cégep, I think to this English class that I took that brought us to the Veterans Hospital. I was at John Abbott College, and the Veterans Hospital was 10 minutes away. And so we would have our English class in the Veterans Hospital for maybe an hour. And then the rest of the time we were paired with a veteran. And so we were applying what we were learning in that English class, which was mostly about the brain. The readings were mostly about the brain and things like that, and how it affects us, how our brain degenerates maybe in aging a little bit. So that's an experience that I hold on to fondly. It counted obviously for community service, but I spent a whole semester, which in Cégep is 15 weeks, paired with a veteran, Monsieur Bailly. So it was someone who I would never have connected with otherwise. So there are kind of programs, there are courses that do incorporate this service component. I think we just kind of maybe need to reimagine what that looks like also if we're educating online as well.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know it's 3 o'clock, and Trish has mentioned Enactus, which is the social, the business, marrying the business with social and environmental impact. And Enactus is amazing and present on many, but not all campuses. So we would like to ask you to quickly take a look at the link that is in the chat box and answer the survey, please. It'll only take you less than 2 minutes, honestly, to just click on that link and give us some feedback. In particular, any subjects you would like us to cover. We will be offering another SDG webinar in September. And just a shout out to Olivier and Tina from his team. This webinar series has been made possible, or shall we say, has been brought to you by the Government of Canada, because they have given us funding to do this project. And as you can see, the appetite is huge. We did have over 60 people at one point registered, and another 40 who will get the recording. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. We will be speaking en français demain to hear from our Francophone partners, some of the Cégeps who are listening in today. Maybe you will join us tomorrow or you will receive the recording. So there's much, much work to be done. And I thank all of the colleagues I see who are with us from every province and territory. And thank you to Olivier, Trish, and Cyrielle for sharing your words with us. We are beyond excited. Many of my colleagues at CICAN joined in. Several left saying they thought it was exceptional and they can hardly wait to see the rest on a recording. So thank you to everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Some of you see you tomorrow. And yes, best of luck to everyone. Be in touch with us if you want to do good work. We're here. My team is here to work with you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Bye, everyone.